What happens when Hollywood's most intense A-lister meets television's most outspoken host? You're about to witness one of the most explosive celebrity interviews ever recorded, where Tom Cruise's legendary composure finally cracked under the relentless pressure of Joy Behar's provocative questioning. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the moment when two unstoppable forces collided on live television, creating television history that had producers scrambling and audiences gasping. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think really pushed Tom over the edge. The morning started like any other at the View Studios in Manhattan. The familiar buzz of pre-show energy filled the air as makeup artists applied final touches and producers ran through last-minute notes. Tom Cruise had arrived early, as was his habit, greeting everyone with his signature megawatt smile and firm handshakes. He seemed genuinely excited to be there, chatting enthusiastically with crew members about his latest Mission Impossible film and sharing behind-the-scenes stories that had everyone laughing. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the professional, welcomed Tom warmly during the brief pre-show meet and greet. "Tom, thanks for being here today. We're really looking forward to talking about the new film," she said, her voice carrying that familiar maternal warmth that made guests feel at ease. "Absolutely, Whoopi. I love being here with you ladies. The View has always been one of my favorite shows to visit," Tom replied, his enthusiasm genuine and infectious. His publicist, standing nearby, smiled approvingly. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. Sarah Haynes bounced over with her characteristic energy, immediately diving into questions about the death-defying stunts that had made Tom famous. "Tom, I have to ask, what goes through your mind when you're hanging off the side of a building or jumping between skyscrapers? Are you ever actually scared?" Tom's eyes lit up as he launched into his passion for practical effects. "Sarah, that's what I live for. The authenticity, the real connection with the audience. When you see me on that screen, that's really me up there. No green screen, no doubles for the dangerous stuff. I believe the audience deserves that level of commitment." Sunny Hostin nodded appreciatively from across the room. "That dedication really shows in your performances. You've been doing this for decades, and the energy never seems to diminish." "Thank you, Sunny. I think when you truly love what you do, when you're passionate about telling stories that matter, that energy comes naturally. Every project is like the first one for me," Tom responded, his voice carrying that familiar intensity that made everything he said sound like the most important thing in the world. Alyssa Farah Griffin, relatively new to the panel but already making her mark, chimed in with genuine curiosity. "Tom, you've worked with so many legendary directors over the years. How do you approach each new collaboration?" The conversation flowed naturally as Tom discussed his working relationships with directors like Steven Spielberg, Christopher McQuarrie, and Brian De Palma. His answers were thoughtful and detailed, showing a deep respect for the craft of filmmaking that went beyond just being a movie star. But Joy Behar had been noticeably quiet during these exchanges, sitting at her spot with a knowing smile that suggested she had something entirely different planned. While her co-hosts engaged in the typical celebrity interview banter, Joy was clearly waiting for her moment to strike. The show's theme music began to play, and the familiar opening credits rolled. The audience applauded enthusiastically as the cameras captured Tom waving from the guest chair, looking completely relaxed and ready for what he assumed would be a standard promotional interview. "Welcome back to The View. I'm Whoopi Goldberg." She began with her trademark delivery, "And we're here with Tom Cruise, who stars in the new Mission Impossible film. Tom, thanks for being with us today." "My pleasure, Whoopi. Great to be here with all of you," Tom replied, flashing that famous smile toward the camera. The interview started exactly as expected. Whoopi asked about the film's plot, the international locations, and Tom's preparation for the role. His answers were polished but genuine, filled with the kind of behind-the-scenes details that audiences loved hearing. "The thing about this particular Mission Impossible," Tom explained, leaning forward with growing excitement, "is that we push the boundaries even further than before. There's a sequence involving a motorcycle chase through the streets of Rome that required months of preparation and coordination with local authorities." Sarah jumped in seamlessly. "And you did all of those motorcycle stunts yourself?" "Every single one. I spent weeks training with professional motorcycle racers, learning the specific techniques needed for high-speed urban navigation. The audience can always tell the difference between authentic action and manufactured action." The conversation continued in this vein for several minutes, with Tom clearly in his element discussing the technical aspects of filmmaking and his commitment to authenticity. The audience was engaged, his co-hosts were asking thoughtful questions, and everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. But then Joy Behar decided it was time to change the entire tone of the interview. "Tom," she said, her voice cutting through the lighthearted atmosphere like a knife, "I have to ask you about something that's been on a lot of people's minds." The shift was immediate and palpable. Tom's smile flickered for just a moment, though he quickly recovered. "Sure, Joy, what's on your mind?" "Well, you talk about authenticity a lot," Joy continued, her tone becoming more pointed with each word. "But don't you think there's a certain irony in that? Given your very public association with Scientology?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to sense that something significant had just happened. Tom's expression remained controlled, but there was a new tension in his posture. "I'm not sure what you mean by irony, Joy," Tom replied carefully, his voice still pleasant but noticeably more measured. "Come on, Tom," Joy pressed, leaning forward with the predatory instincts of a seasoned interviewer who sensed weakness. "You talk about giving audiences the real you, but Scientology is widely regarded as a controversial organization with some very questionable practices. Don't you think your fans deserve to know how much of your public persona is influenced by those beliefs?" Whoopi immediately tried to intervene, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. "Joy, maybe we should." But Tom held up a hand, his famous intensity now focused entirely on Joy. "No, it's okay, Whoopi. I'm happy to address this." He turned back to Joy, his smile now clearly forced. "Joy, I think you're operating from some misconceptions about my faith. Scientology has been an incredibly positive force in my life, and I'm proud to be associated with it." "Positive force?" Joy's voice rose slightly, her combative instincts fully engaged now. "Tom, there are documented cases of families being torn apart, former members speaking out about abuse, financial exploitation. How do you reconcile being the face of something that has caused so much pain?" The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah tried to jump in with a lighter question, but Joy was not about to be derailed. "I think you need to check your sources, Joy," Tom said, his voice still controlled but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "What you're describing sounds like tabloid sensationalism, not factual reporting." "Tabloid sensationalism?" Joy's voice was incredulous now. "Tom, these are testimonies from real people, documented investigations, court cases. This isn't gossip. This is journalism." The tension in the studio was becoming unbearable. Tom's jaw was noticeably clenched, and his hands gripped the arms of his chair with white-knuckled intensity. "Joy, I think what you're failing to understand," Tom said, his voice taking on that familiar intensity that anyone who had seen his previous controversial interviews would recognize, "is that you're attacking something that has fundamentally changed my life for the better. You're attacking my faith, my beliefs, my personal journey toward understanding." Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, Tom's defensive response seemed to energize her further. "Tom, I'm not attacking your faith. I'm asking legitimate questions about an organization that has a very public track record of controversy. Surely you can understand why people might be concerned." "Concerned about what exactly?" Tom's voice was rising now, the carefully maintained Hollywood composure beginning to crack. "Concerned about people finding spiritual fulfillment? Concerned about individuals taking control of their own lives and destinies?" Alyssa Farah Griffin attempted to redirect the conversation, her political background giving her experience in diffusing tense situations. "Tom, maybe we could talk about how your personal beliefs influence your approach to character development in your films?" But Tom was locked onto Joy now, his famous laser focus entirely concentrated on what he clearly perceived as an attack. "No, Alyssa, I think Joy has something she wants to say, and I think she should say it." "Go ahead, Joy. What exactly is your point here?" Joy's smile was sharp and calculating. "My point, Tom, is that you have a platform. You have influence. Young people look up to you. And when you promote an organization that former members say destroyed their families, that's a responsibility you need to acknowledge." "Former members who were expelled for their own ethical violations," Tom shot back, his voice now carrying the kind of intensity usually reserved for his most dramatic film scenes. "Joy, you're parroting the same tired allegations that have been debunked over and over again?" "Debunked by who, Tom? By Scientology itself?" Joy's voice was incredulous. "That's like asking a company to investigate its own wrongdoing and expecting an honest answer." Whoopi tried again to regain control of the situation, her years of experience as a moderator telling her this was spiraling beyond recovery. "Okay, let's take a breath here, everyone. Tom, maybe we could discuss your upcoming projects? But Tom was beyond such simple redirections now. His entire body language had changed, leaning forward aggressively, his hands gesturing with sharp, precise movements. Whoopi, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think your co-host here has made some very serious accusations that deserve a response. They're not accusations, Tom. Joy interjected, her voice cutting through his words. They're questions. Questions that any reasonable person would ask about an organization with Scientology's track record. Track record? Tom's voice was incredulous now. Joy, what exactly do you know about Scientology's track record? Have you studied the philosophy? Have you read the materials? Have you spoken to current members about their experiences? I've read the investigative reports, Joy replied coolly. I've watched the documentaries. I've listened to the testimonies of people who say they were harmed. Investigative reports by who? Documentaries made by who? Testimonies from disgruntled former members with axes to grind? Tom's voice was getting louder with each question. Joy, you're basing your entire argument on biased sources with clear agendas. Sarah Haynes, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken, tried to lighten the mood with her characteristic optimism. Tom, maybe we could talk about the positive aspects of your spiritual journey, how it's helped you personally. But Tom was too far into combat mode to accept the olive branch. Sarah, I'd love to talk about the positive aspects, but it's hard to have that conversation when someone is sitting here spreading misinformation and prejudice. Misinformation? Joy's voice rose to match Tom's intensity. Tom, are you seriously suggesting that all the former members who have spoken out, all the journalists who have investigated, all the legal cases that have been filed, are all just lies? I'm suggesting that people need to consider the source, Tom replied, his famous smile now completely gone, replaced by an expression of barely contained fury. I'm suggesting that when someone leaves an organization under less than ideal circumstances, they might have motivations other than truth-telling. Sunny Hostin, her legal background making her particularly sensitive to accusations and evidence, tried to find middle ground. Tom, I think what Joy is trying to say is that when there's a pattern of similar allegations from multiple sources, it raises legitimate questions that deserve answers. Sunny, with all due respect, Tom said, his voice dripping with barely concealed condescension, you're a smart woman. You're a lawyer. You understand how evidence works. Would you convict someone based on the testimony of disgruntled former employees with clear financial incentives to lie? But, Tom, Sunny pressed gently, when multiple former employees tell similar stories, when there are documented court cases, when investigative journalists from respected publications raise concerns, doesn't that suggest there might be something worth examining? Tom's laugh was harsh and bitter. Respected publications? Are we talking about the same tabloid press that has been attacking me personally for decades? The same media that profits from controversy and sensationalism? Joy pounced on his response. Tom, these aren't tabloids. We're talking about legitimate news organizations, documentary filmmakers, investigative journalists with track records of accuracy. Accuracy? Tom's voice was now openly mocking. Joy, these are the same people who have been spreading lies about me, about my personal life, about my relationships, for years. And now you want me to believe they're suddenly interested in accuracy when it comes to my faith? The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the crew members had stopped their usual bustling activity to watch the confrontation unfold. Tom, Joy said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, I'm not trying to attack you personally, but when you're as famous as you are, when you have the platform you have, people are going to ask questions about the organizations you support. And I'm happy to answer legitimate questions, Tom replied, his voice still intense but slightly more controlled. But what you're doing isn't asking questions, Joy. You're making accusations. You're spreading prejudice. You're attacking something you clearly don't understand. Then help me understand, Joy shot back. Explain to me how an organization that has been involved in so many controversies, that has been accused of breaking up families, that has been investigated by law enforcement in multiple countries, deserves the kind of unconditional support you're giving it. Tom's response was immediate and fierce. Because I've seen the good it does, Joy. I've experienced the positive changes it creates in people's lives. I've witnessed the genuine spiritual growth and personal development that happens when people engage with these materials honestly and openly. But what about the people who say they were harmed? Joy pressed. What about the families that were broken up? What about the financial exploitation? Do you just dismiss all of that? I don't dismiss legitimate concerns, Tom replied, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge. But I also don't accept character assassination masquerading as journalism. And I don't accept religious bigotry disguised as legitimate inquiry. The word bigotry hung in the air like a bomb. Joy's eyes flashed with anger, and even Whoopi looked shocked by the accusation. Bigotry? Joy's voice was incredulous. Tom, asking questions about a controversial organization is not bigotry. It's called journalism. It's called accountability. Is it? Tom's voice was now openly confrontational. Because it seems to me like you've already made up your mind. It seems like you invited me here not to discuss my film, not to have a genuine conversation, but to ambush me with your predetermined agenda. Alyssa tried one more time to salvage the situation. Tom, I don't think Joy meant it as an ambush. These are questions that people have, and maybe this is an opportunity to address them directly. But Tom was beyond diplomacy now. Alyssa, look at how this conversation started. Look at Joy's tone, her approach, her clear bias. This isn't an honest inquiry. This is a setup. Joy's response was immediate and cutting. A setup? Tom, you're a public figure promoting a controversial organization. These questions come with the territory. If you can't handle basic scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be so public about your involvement. That was the moment everything changed. Tom's face went completely still, his eyes narrowing to slits as he stared at Joy with an intensity that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. Can't handle scrutiny? His voice was quiet now, but somehow more menacing than when he had been shouting. Joy, I've been handling scrutiny my entire career. What I can't handle is dishonesty, masquerading as journalism. Dishonesty? Joy's voice rose again, her own anger now matching Tom's. Tom, everything I've mentioned can be verified. There are court records, documented testimonies, investigative reports from multiple sources. How is that dishonest? Because you're presenting one side of the story, Tom replied, his voice building in intensity again. You're cherry-picking the most sensational allegations while ignoring the positive experiences of thousands of people. You're engaging in the worst kind of yellow journalism. Whoopi made one final attempt to restore order. Okay, everyone, let's take a step back here. Tom, we invited you here to talk about your film, and I think we've gotten off track. But Tom was completely focused on Joy now, as if the other hosts had ceased to exist. No, Whoopi, I think we're exactly on track. I think Joy has revealed exactly what this is about. This isn't about my film. This isn't about my career. This is about her personal agenda against my faith. Personal agenda? Joy's laugh was sharp and bitter. Tom, I don't have a personal agenda. I have professional responsibilities. When a major celebrity promotes a controversial organization, it's my job to ask questions. Your job? Tom's voice was incredulous. Joy, your job is supposed to be entertainment television. Your job is supposed to be having conversations with guests, not ambushing them with character assassination. Character assassination? Joy stood up slightly in her chair, her voice becoming more heated. Tom, asking about your public associations is not character assassination. It's called accountability. Accountability to who? Tom shot back, also leaning forward aggressively. To the tabloid press that pays for sensational stories? To the disgruntled former members who profit from tell-all books? To the documentary filmmakers who make money from controversy? Sarah Haynes, her voice shaking slightly with nervousness, tried one more time to diffuse the situation. Tom, maybe we could focus on the positive aspects of your spiritual journey? How it's helped you in your career? But Tom was beyond such gentle redirections. Sarah, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think it's important that people understand what's really happening here. Joy didn't invite me here for a conversation. She invited me here for an inquisition. An inquisition? Joy's voice was now openly mocking. Tom, you're being incredibly dramatic. I asked you about your public associations with a controversial organization. That's not an inquisition. That's journalism. Is it? Tom's voice was deadly quiet again. Because it seems to me like you've already decided I'm guilty of something. It seems like you've already made up your mind about me, about my beliefs, about my faith. I haven't made up my mind about anything, Joy replied, her voice still combative. But I'm not going to pretend that legitimate concerns don't exist just because you're a movie star. Tom's smile when it came was cold and completely without warmth. There it is. There's the real Joy Behar. You don't care about legitimate concerns. You care about taking down someone whose success makes you uncomfortable. Makes me uncomfortable? Joy's voice was incredulous. Tom, your success doesn't make me uncomfortable. Your promotion of a controversial organization makes me ask questions. There's a difference. No, Joy, there isn't, Tom replied, his voice now carrying that dangerous intensity that had made him famous in dramatic roles. You're threatened by someone who has found genuine spiritual fulfillment. You're threatened by someone who has taken control of their own life and destiny. Sunny Hostin, her legal training making her acutely aware of how dangerous this conversation was becoming, tried to interrupt. Tom, I don't think Joy feels threatened. I think she's asking questions that many people have. But Tom was completely locked onto Joy now, his focus absolute and unwavering. Sunny, look at her approach. Look at her tone. Look at her clear bias. This isn't about asking questions. This is about destruction. Destruction? Joy's laugh was harsh and bitter. Tom, you're the one who's being destructive here. You're the one who's turned a simple interview into a personal attack. Personal attack? Tom's voice was now openly furious. Joy, you started this. You brought up my faith. You made the accusations. You created this hostile environment. I asked questions. Joy shot back. That's what journalists do. We ask questions about things that matter. Things that matter to who? Tom's voice was getting louder again. To you? To your agenda? To your ratings? Alyssa Farah Griffin, drawing on her political experience with heated debates, tried to find common ground. Tom, maybe we can agree that both perspectives are valid? That people can have legitimate questions while also respecting your right to your beliefs? But Tom was beyond compromise now. Alyssa, there's nothing legitimate about what Joy is doing. She's engaging in religious persecution. She's spreading prejudice and calling it journalism. Religious persecution? Joy's voice was incredulous. Tom, asking questions about a controversial organization is not religious persecution. It's called free speech. It's called accountability. Accountability? Tom's voice was now openly mocking. Joy, you want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your accountability. Let's talk about your responsibility to present balanced information instead of one-sided attacks. One-sided attacks? Joy stood up completely now, her voice rising to match Tom's intensity. Tom, I've given you every opportunity to respond. I've asked you direct questions. How is that one-sided? Because you're not listening to the answers? Tom replied, also standing up, his famous intensity now focused like a laser beam. You're not interested in understanding. You're interested in destruction. The studio was completely silent now, everyone sensing that something unprecedented was about to happen. Even the camera operator seemed frozen in place, unsure whether to keep filming or look away. Tom, Whoopi said, her voice carrying a note of desperation, maybe we should take a commercial break. But Tom was beyond such simple solutions. No, Whoopi, I think people need to see this. I think people need to understand what passes for journalism these days. What passes for journalism? Joy's voice was now openly hostile. Tom, you're having a meltdown on national television because someone asked you about your public associations. That's not journalism's fault, that's yours. The word meltdown hung in the air like a challenge. Tom's face went completely white, and for a moment he seemed to struggle for words. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with more rage than anyone had ever heard from him. Meltdown? He said, his voice barely above a whisper. Joy, you want to see a meltdown? You want to see what happens when someone pushes too far? Tom, Sarah said, her voice urgent with concern. Maybe we should all just take a breath. But Tom was already reaching for his microphone, his movements sharp and decisive. No, Sarah, I think I've taken enough breaths. I think I've been patient enough. I think I've been professional enough. He yanked the microphone from his shirt with a sharp, violent motion that made everyone in the studio flinch. Joy, you want to know what I think? I think you're a bitter, small-minded person who gets her kicks from tearing down people who have found something you'll never understand. Tom, Whoopi said, her voice sharp with alarm. That's enough. But Tom was already standing up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. No, Whoopi, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. He turned back to Joy, his voice now carrying a cold fury that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. Joy, you talk about accountability? You talk about responsibility? What about your responsibility to treat guests with basic human decency? Decency? Joy's voice was defiant, even as Tom loomed over her. Tom, you're the one who's been shouting and making accusations. I've been asking legitimate questions. Legitimate questions? Tom's voice was now openly contemptuous. Joy, you wouldn't know a legitimate question if it bit you on your narrow, prejudiced behind. The studio erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Even Joy looked stunned by the personal nature of the attack. Tom, Alyssa said, her voice shaking, that's completely inappropriate. Inappropriate? Tom turned to face the entire panel now, his famous smile replaced by an expression of pure disdain. You want to know what's inappropriate? Ambushing a guest with personal attacks. Spreading religious bigotry on national television? Hiding behind the mask of journalism to engage in character assassination? Tom, please, Sunny said, her voice pleading. Let's just calm down and try to have a rational conversation. But Tom was already moving toward the edge of the set, his movements sharp and decisive. Rational conversation? With Joy Behar? That's like trying to have a rational conversation with a vulture. A vulture? Joy's voice was incredulous. Tom, you're calling me a vulture because I asked you about Scientology? Tom stopped dead in his tracks and turned back to face her, his eyes blazing with fury. No, Joy, I'm calling you a vulture because you feed on other people's pain, because you profit from controversy, because you destroy people for entertainment. I destroy people? Joy's voice was getting louder again. Tom, you're the one who's being destructive here. You're the one who's having a tantrum because someone asked you tough questions. Tough questions? Tom's laugh was bitter and harsh. Joy, you haven't asked me one tough question. You've made accusations. You've spread lies. You've engaged in the worst kind of tabloid journalism. Tabloid journalism? Joy stood up again, her voice matching Tom's intensity. Tom, asking about your public associations is not tabloid journalism. It's called doing my job. Your job? Tom's voice was now openly mocking. Joy, your job is entertainment television. Your job is to make people laugh, not to destroy them with lies and prejudice. Lies and prejudice? Joy's voice was incredulous. Tom, everything I've said can be verified. There are court records, documented testimonies, investigative reports. How is that lies and prejudice? Tom's response was immediate and final. Because you're not interested in truth, Joy. You're interested in destruction. And I'm not going to be part of it. With that, he turned and walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned silence that seemed to echo through the entire studio. The cameras continued to roll, capturing the shocked expressions of the remaining hosts and the complete bewilderment of the audience. Joy sat back down slowly, her face pale but defiant. Well, she said, her voice shaking slightly, I guess that's what happens when you ask Tom Cruise about Scientology. Whoopi, ever the professional, tried to restore some semblance of order. We'll be right back after this commercial break. But everyone knew that something unprecedented had just happened. Tom Cruise, Hollywood's most professional celebrity, had just walked off one of television's most popular talk shows, leaving behind a confrontation that would be talked about for years to come. What did you think of this incredible clash between two unstoppable forces? Was Joy Behar right to push those questions, or did she cross a line that should never be crossed? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that you won't see anywhere else.